My dad, Clifford Pugh, has been living with dementia for more than 8 years. 3 years ago, after an emergency hospital admission, he spent 6 months in a mental health assessment unit after it was decided that Mum could no longer cope with him at home. During those 6 months, he was given increasingly strong antipsychotic drugs to control his behaviour, which changed him from being a physically well man into a stooped, shuffling, incoherent wreck. Dad was confused and scared, and his behaviour was difficult to manage, often becoming aggressive. It regularly took 4 staff to carry out his personal care. Dad was assessed for continuing healthcare funding, full funding by the NHS. This was declined. So I looked into funding options and discovered that the local authority would partially fund his care on top of Dad's pension contributions. I soon realised that due to his aggression and the fact that he was physically able, the choices of home were very limited, regardless of who was paying. He needed highly specialised dementia care. There was a home which offered this 4 miles from my parents' home. However, we were told that this wasn't an option as it was too expensive. The only home that agreed to take him at the funding amount was 22 miles away from my mum and the area in which he'd lived for more than 50 years. My sisters and I all live away, so in order to visit him, my 73-year-old mother would have had to spend 2 hours on a bus each way, changing 3 times on each journey. We refused to accept the home, and I made a formal complaint to the County Council's head of Consumer Relations. Shortly after this, Dad was reassessed for continuing healthcare funding and was granted it. It soon became clear that continuing healthcare funding doesn't have the same budget restrictions as a local authority, as Dad was immediately placed in the specialised dementia home near to home, where Mum could visit him regularly. This home had no qualms about taking Dad, even with his aggression and difficult behaviour. Within 2 weeks of being there, only 2 people were needed to carry out his personal care, even with the drug dosage having been hugely reduced as we'd requested. Dad was happy and much calmer. In August last year, his continuing healthcare funding was removed. The reason given was that his behaviour had become less aggressive, making him easier to manage. But he still needed a very high level of care. His condition was much worse. He had no cognition, doubly incontinent, totally immobile, with bed sores and needing 24-hour nursing and care. We're informed that the home Dad was in cost more than the local authority were prepared to pay, so we're back in the same position as before, being forced to move into a cheaper home, possibly miles away, or having to pay a top-up fee to keep him where he was. Fortunately for Dad, no other home was willing to take him for less because his needs were too high, so the local authority paid the extra cost as they had no choice. We began a continuing healthcare appeal last August, which took nearly a year to be heard, and then another 2 months for us to be informed of the outcome. I heard this week that the appeal was unsuccessful, as despite Dad's high level of needs, they are not considered intense or complex enough for continuing healthcare funding. When continuing healthcare funding isn't granted, care home choice is severely restricted by the local authority budget available. Vulnerable people are then isolated in care homes which can be miles away from their local area. For those with dementia in particular, time spent together is very precious, as the clock is counting down to when family and friends will no longer be recognised. The problems we had were made worse by the fact that both health and social care professionals were involved in Dad's case. Neither appeared to be aware of each other's procedures or regulations, and there was very little, if any, sharing of information. The Commission proposes that there should be one single body to commission all care homes for all levels of need. If the Commission's recommendations had been in place at the time, Dad would have been assessed by one system, and it wouldn't have mattered whether his needs were deemed to be of a social or health nature. They would have just been needs that had to be met. My family wouldn't have been accused of being difficult, simply because we refused to allow Dad to be isolated in an unsuitable home. And Mum wouldn't have had to cope with, amongst other upsetting comments, being told that unless we hurried up and accepted a home for Dad, he'd be placed somewhere without our consent. In being part of the Expert by Experience group, I've heard appalling stories of failures within the social care system. I hope that all the injustices experienced were not in vain and can show why there needs to be an overhaul of the current system and that the Commission's recommendations can make a difference. And thank you.